Super strength. In order for you to punch a hole through a concrete wall, for example, you'd need about 250,000 newtons of force. That's about 100 times stronger than the average person. Our world is built for the average person. Doors, cars, houses, windows, phones, computers, etc. Just imagine how hard living in society would be if you were 100 times taller or 100 times wider than the average person. Strength could be seen the same way. You wouldn't even be able to use your phone or keyboard without breaking it. Not to mention pressure. If you try to lift up a train, you're actually a lot more likely to go through it due to the surface area of your hand being so small compared to the force applied to it. The way to do it would be to really turn down a few notches, and instead of super strength, you just get very much above average strength, like Captain America from the comics. This will apply to every superpower covered in this video. The super in question means overly exaggerated, because if we just do a very toned down version of these powers, then they would actually be pretty doable. Super speed. The problem with super speed isn't the speed itself, it's actually acceleration. Humans can easily travel at 600 miles per hour on a plane, for example, but if we went from 0 miles per hour to 600 miles per hour in a single second, we would die. Also, without super reaction times, super speed would be virtually useless. If you can't react to things as fast as you can run, then you would just bump into everything. Not to mention that going so fast would make your entire body catch on fire. And also, the way we walk or run is by basically pushing the ground beneath our feet backwards. Your feet act as a propulsion system, so if you use a tremendous amount of force to propel yourself forwards, you would actually just fly into space. Teleportation. The Earth is moving so fast in space that if you teleported really far, you would likely just end up in space, in the air, or inside an object like a wall, if your teleportation were not instantaneous. But even if it were, if you teleported from the equator to Greenland, for example, due to the Earth not being a 100% perfect sphere and the angle at which it rotates, you would have to match the speed and momentum of Greenland. Otherwise, it would be like jumping on a treadmill that's going too fast. Also, even teleporting to very low distances would probably just kill you, because you would be teleporting into atoms and particles. So your blood and organs would just immediately fill up with oxygen and other elements. Invisibility. In order to make yourself invisible, you would have to make photons basically go around you, because that's how people see stuff. But if you did that, you would also be blind, because that would mean the photons wouldn't be hitting your eyes either. The solution would be to not make the photons go around your eyes, which would make your entire body invisible except your eyeballs. So essentially, you would just become a pair of floating eyes, which kinda defeats the whole invisibility point. Not to mention that if there were objects around you, they would look weird, kind of how a black hole looks when it's swallowing light. Also, anyone with a thermal camera, which are a lot more common than most people think, could very easily detect your heat signature. And your brain also can't process being invisible. For example, if you try to eat with your eyes closed, there's a pretty high chance that you'll actually miss your mouth. Now imagine if you could literally not see your body. You would actually just bump into stuff all the time. Or your brain would just go crazy and you would probably end up developing some mental illness. Flight. First of all, you wouldn't be able to fly very high. You would just lose oxygen. At just about 4 kilometers high, you would need to breathe from a pressurized oxygen tank like scuba divers. Any higher than 3 kilometers and you would just literally freeze, meaning you would have to fly at an altitude of just above skyscrapers, which is still low enough for radars to pick up your movements in the sky, so the government would just shut you down. Either that, or you would have to follow very strict regulations on flight, just like every other air vehicle. But even if that wasn't the case, if you go any faster than the average speed limit within a city, you would just straight up die due to an impact with a fly, or start freezing from the wind. Think about it, when you put your hand out the window of your car on a highway, you immediately feel your hand colder. Imagine what that would be like on your entire body with no protection at all. Immortality. In order for you to be actually immortal, you would have to have a whole bunch of other superpowers that also make you invulnerable. You would have to be unkillable, meaning you would have to have super regeneration, you wouldn't age, your body would have to be super resistant so that you wouldn't die in a car crash, amongst other things to prevent you from drowning, freezing, suffocating, etc. Assuming all of these things, you would eventually just live until the end of the universe and either be swallowed by a black hole and survive it, which is terrifying, or just be floating in space for the rest of eternity alone in the dark of the void, which is equally terrifying. But assuming immortality just means you don't age, that would mean you would eventually die to external factors already mentioned, which means you could live for thousands of years, but not forever.